Okay, hello everybody. Dear students, sending greetings from my parents' home in this involuntary quarantine. And since I received some messages from you, especially by email, that you're missing my lectures and that you would like me to explain some of the aspects of British literature, especially regarding uh, the theater of the absurd or maybe the satire and the following lectures, so that you are ready and that you understand all the necessary aspects and all the necessary points for the final examination. Uh, at the beginning, I'd like to explain that the suggestion of oral examination that I suggested in the previous email is just a suggestion. It doesn't mean that uh, that there will be oral examination in person. It's just a suggestion. It all depends on the regulations and on the decisions of the representatives of the university, and also it depends on the development of the situation, the current situation regarding the new coronavirus. Second thing, uh, I hope that you're all doing well, that you're safe and healthy. I believe that you've got a lot of tasks to do, and so I thought that maybe the lectures that I sent you could be kind of supplemented with this video lecture, which is the first time for me doing this. So I'm sorry for any inconvenience or any mistakes, especially technical mistakes. But today I'd like to tell you something about the theater of the absurd, especially regarding the philosophical aspect of this literary stream and also the philosophical stream that defined the entire era. Uh, First of all, you can of course kind of relate to the lecture that I sent you in the email, and there you have some information that you can actually learn by yourself regarding the definition of the term that was coined, as you probably already seen, by Martin Aslin in 1962 in his book. And it is actually it really is related to the group of artists and playwrights and the writers who were supposed to create an entire generation of people who were commenting the on the then situation, especially regarding the post-war, post-Second World War situation in the world. And the point that is related to the philosophical aspect of this literary stream deals with the position or the role of an individual within the world itself. To make it more clear, um, even the term itself, the theater of the absurd, actually derives from the main point that most of these stage plays that were written and that belong to this literary stream, uh, they were absurd. They obviously had no point. They obviously had no meaning. Yeah, there were plays like Empty Chairs, for example, uh, which actually comprised, I believe, no actors, and actually the audience saw only the empty chairs, and the points or the sense of the stage play at first sight was kind of lost, yeah, and maybe kind of hidden or blurred. But when you delve deeper into the meaning and when you actually connect the philosophical principles that were applied within these stage plays, then you will actually understand what the playwrights were trying to express. Um, so it was similarly to the previous literary streams, especially regarding the modernist and postmodern era. It was always the reaction to the then situation or to some previous event. In this case, it was the Second World War, and as you can imagine yourself, and you can understand that any war in any part of the world brings misery and also the questions of the people. What is the point of life? What is the point of living? Where are we heading to? Does this world have any kind of future? Is the humanity still a valid term for all of us? Or have we kind of reached a point where life has no meaning at all? So these playwrights, who were often philosophers themselves, they ask these questions because they uh, personally actually experienced the horrors of the Second World War. They saw people dying. They saw people dealing with poverty and sickness, uh, and not only the physical sickness, but also the sickness of the mind, mental instability, and again asking questions: what will be after the war when the world is torn apart, destroyed? The entire cities were destroyed. Millions of people died. Uh, and so they were trying to express, sometimes in a strange way, kind of a message for the future generation, or maybe some kind of a hope that world will go on, that there is a chance for humanity to be restored or to be renewed within this world. So that's like the basic principle. Uh, the philosophy that actually was the inspiration and from which these playwrights drew their principles and their points was the existential philosophy, as you can see in the lecture in the PDF file that I sent you in the email. And the existential philosophy asks the same questions: what is the point of life? And there are some aspects, you can remember them, the basic fundamental aspects of this philosophy. Uh, People wonder about life and death. Then there is this point of incomprehension of life and death. Always asking what is the meaning, what is the sense of these two. Then they often express despair, despair over or of life itself. You can imagine, for example, I will talk about it later in this video lecture, in the stage play Endgame by Samuel Beckett, when there are four characters and they are living within one space, within one room. So that's the limitation of the space. Inability to go out because probably the world was destroyed. Yes, these are the first hints of the post-apocalyptic or dystopian genres that were evolving during this era already, and that we will deal with in the dystopia and science fiction lecture, if you will. Then, last but not least, it is the sense or the point of meaninglessness of human existence. Uh, in the previous streams, people were sometimes relying on their ratio, sometimes they were relying on their heart and soul, romantic, for example, or romantic era. Remember the period of rationalism, or humanism, Renaissance, and as you can remember, in the modernist and especially postmodern era, uh, these questions, these principles, and these tasks, or the position, role of human being, is kind of intermingled. It is intermixed, and it becomes more and more complex. And it's very hard to understand for an individual what is his or her role within this world, especially if the world was destroyed or heavily impacted by the war. So the wonder of life and death, incomprehension of life and death, despair, and the meaninglessness of human existence. These are the four fundamental principles of the existential philosophy. In the lecture, you could also see an illustration of man trying to roll a huge stone ball up the hill. That's Sisyphus, and many of you probably know the mythos of Sisyphus. It's the mythos talking about the endless work, endless effort to reach the goal. And for the playwrights and for the philosophers of the existential philosophy, uh, they were after the Second World War, they were actually posed into this role of Sisyphus. Uh, they lived day by day, especially right after the war and also during the war. They were searching for food, they were fighting for their own existence, they were facing death and sickness and despair. And by rolling the earth from day to day, it actually resembles this endless work of the mythical Sisyphus, who's trying to reach the goal, who's trying to roll that big stone up the hill to reach the top of the hill. But right in front or before the top or before reaching the top of the hill, the stone actually rolls back down, and he needs to start over. And that's the cycle of life actually, and that's another interesting discourse of existential philosophy, and also the stage plays that were written that belong to the theater of the absurd, or absurd drama, if you want. That's the cyclical structure of those stories, of those stage plays, on and on, over and over again. And it seems that it's got no end, and that the end is nowhere near to be seen or sensed by an individual. Uh, Among the representatives of the existential philosophy, you could read about Albert Camus and his existential philosophy. Uh, he actually wrote the essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, uh, which comprises the basic discourse, or the basic claim that life is inherently meaningless. No matter what we do, in the end, we find out that actually it's got no point. Yeah. And you can think of it also from your point of view as students. You're trying to reach your goals, you're trying to do your tasks, and one week, especially these days when you're actually overwhelmed with the task from the teachers, you finish a certain collection of tasks, and then you actually maybe have like a couple of hours, maybe of one day off, and then another collection, another set of tasks comes, and at this point you might think it's got no end, it's endless. Yeah. And what is the meaning, what is the point of doing this over and over again? Some of you might see the bright light in the future, that you will get your degree, you will get your diploma at the end. uh, some of you are very hardworking, some of you are not that much hardworking, but it really doesn't depend on whether you are hardworking or not. Sometimes it depends on the external um, circumstances. You might be a very good person. You might believe in God. You might believe in many other things, and sometimes you can do the best you can. But depending on the external circumstances and the external situation, that is the one which actually forms your future life and your future accomplishments. And you might get stuck in this at this point of believing that life has no meaning, that it's senseless and meaningless and pointless. And but at the same time, you might try to seek and find the point in this pointlessness. And that's another thing about the episode drama. The individuals, the characters in these stage plays were trying, even though it doesn't seem so very often, although they are stuck in one room, they are stuck in the dystopian, destroyed world, there is still some hope of tomorrow. Even the thing that they actually wake up the next day in the morning, and even though they do the same things over and over again, that's the cyclical structure, that actually expresses the hope for the next day and the next day. And maybe there will be new people coming. There will be children born who will form a new generation. And this generation will actually learn from the mistakes of the previous generation, and they will try to create a new, better world, if you will, a brave new world. And that's another point of these plays. Uh, so also Sisyphus, as a mythical hero, was punished by the gods, and some of these stage plays actually express this idea that this point that we reached as humans, or as civilization, of this pointlessness is maybe, or was, a punishment by gods, or maybe by God. Yeah. or it was just punishment that we brought upon ourselves. Yeah. So you can see it from different perspectives, and it opens space for a very fruitful conversation and discussion. Uh, but the main point among the others is the senselessness, yeah, the pointlessness that actually no matter what you do, it doesn't have any meaning. Yeah? Okay, as for the stage plays or the works and their structure or what they looked like or what they look like, uh, first of all, it's very important to mention that the stage plays create uh, illogical patterns. Yeah, I don't know whether you ever were in the theater and if you watched a stage play written by Samuel Beckett, for example, or Albert Camus, or anybody, any author who belongs to the theater of the absurd, you might laugh during the performance because you might find it illogical, strange, even funny. Yeah, the nature of life itself was or is presented in these plays as something irrational, literally absurd, and it's okay if you laugh. There are many variations and also performances of the absurd dramas on YouTube, for example. Some of them are very good. You can also find some plays written by Samuel Beckett on YouTube, and some of them are really good. And you might find yourself laughing and maybe not understanding anything. Yeah, even the lines of the actors or of the characters are illogical and strange. They don't make any sense. But when you actually find this pattern of cyclical repetition of every day, or another aspect, waiting for something that never comes, like in Waiting for Godot. Just a technical remark. Try to remember that the name of this of another play by Samuel Beckett is not Waiting for Godot, but Waiting for Godot, and this is both the influence of the French language, because Samuel Beckett was fluent in French language and he used French language a lot. And the second thing is when you pronounce it correctly, Waiting for Godot, it actually resembles like waiting for God. God, oh, God, oh, three dots, like waiting for something that probably never comes, or maybe it has already come, but you don't see it, and you need to find some way how to see it, how to perceive it. So these stage plays also dealt with the questions of religion, partly. Yeah. From the point of view of structure, uh, you might find them again. As you can see, I'm also laughing because I'm actually reminding myself of these stage plays, and I laughed a lot because especially in my times when I was a student, uh, we found it really weird. Why should we learn about dramas or stage plays that don't make any sense? These authors we believed were just strange. They were maybe crazy, and they were just trying to use new techniques, similarly to James Joyce, just to kind of show off. Yeah, that we can use these techniques. You can see that we are capable of creating new techniques just to make it new. Yeah, remember the motto of or the slogan of Ezra Pound: "Make new." It still is valid even during the 50s and 60s of the absurd drama period. But within this laughter, within this logicality, you can find some patterns that you can actually stick to, and these will help you understand the the main point, maybe, maybe at least find some hints of the main point. Uh, so as for the structure of the stage plays, they often deviate from the traditional uh, structural organization of the scenes. Yeah, they are cyclic. Uh, Usually they end at the same point at which it actually begins. So it's cyclical, just like in Endgame. Uh, every day is always the same. The characters do the same things. It's almost like a ritual, yeah. And these rituals help these individuals, uh, these characters, because they are individuals. They live together, but they are individual souls and beings trying to survive, trying to understand the world, their situation. Often, as you could see in the lecture, the scenery or the decorations, for example, are often unrecognizable. In Endgame, you can see a sofa. There is a character sitting in the sofa or sleeping. There are two trash bins. Surprisingly, there are two other characters hiding in the trash bins. Uh, uh, Nag and Nelly, yeah, members of the family. Uh, but for you, some of you might find it disgusting or dirty and not very pleasant to look at. But that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. To actually evoke kind of a disgust and this feeling of dirtiness within yourself. Also, as for the dialogues, compared to Shakespeare, maybe you might be surprised why I'm mentioning Shakespeare, because for Shakespeare, many students don't understand Shakespeare because Shakespeare uses Middle English, very we could call it posh maybe, uh, and is also because of the structure of the sentences and vocabulary, but it's different, of course. But the stage plays written by Beckett, for example, they don't use Middle English; they use modern English, but still the replicas and the dialogues, the monologues, they are not very much understandable at first sight or at first hearing, and it's not because of language itself. It's because uh, they're trying to express some kind of a whole, yeah, or an emptiness, the blackness. But when you delve deeper into uh, the structure of these dialogues or monologues, you will find the point, what they are trying actually to say. Uh, when at the beginning of Endgame, uh, there is this line of like that goes like, "It's finished, finished, almost finished." Day by day, heap by heap, and so on and so on. You might think, well, what's the point of this? Maybe he hints at the cyclical structure or cyclical nature of the day or of the days that they live kind of. Yeah, because that's the question: do they really live, or do they just survive the days in this dystopian, destroyed world? But the characters often communicate in short. They're very sharp, like cut off dialogues, one word, two word, three word sentences or phrases. And in Endgame, for example, it seems that each character is actually almost like talking to himself. They don't listen to each other, but in the end, you will understand that they do listen to each other because that's the part of their lives. This exchange of nonsensical dialogues or words, questions and answers is the inherent part of their lives, and they cannot live without it. So actually, it in the end it makes sense. Uh, the way they communicate, also the point of communication is seems to be very futile. Yeah, again, pointless. These terms of pointlessness, meaninglessness, emptiness will be repeated over and over again because that's the essence of the theater of the absurd. Often, the scenery also might resemble some bad dream or nightmare. It is chaotic. It is not organized. But again, in the end, you will find some structure, some organization, or the sense of for organization in this scenery. On one hand, you might laugh during the performance, and you might think that, oh, this is a comedy. But at the same time, you have a feeling that what the characters are going through is very tragical. So it's like a tragic comedy, or the combination of these two. And it's not only present in the works of Samuel Beckett. There are other prolific authors and representatives of this theater of the absurd. Arthur Adam, Eugene Ionesco, Jean Genet, Harold Pinter, Edward Albee, Tom Stoppard. These are all excellent writers, excellent playwrights, and they actually dealt with very interesting topics and and situations of the people. Sometimes people who meet somebody else in the park, and this stranger changes the life of the main hero completely. And it's about accidents, about unorganized, unplanned events in one's life. Um, okay, what else can we say um, about the performances, for example, or the stage plays? Um, the characters uh, doesn't really depend whether we talk about Beckett or anybody else, but let's focus on Beckett. Um, here comes, for some of you, maybe a new term, and that's archetype. The characters in his plays are archetypes. Uh, the basic definition, or the difference between type and archetype, is that archetypes are not limited by time, they're not limited by space, and they are universal. So a typical archetype can be found in fairy tales for children: the witch, the wizard, or I don't know what else, bad wolf. Yeah, maybe a strange example, but still, it's an archetype which can be found in many variations, many forms, in many other stories, in all eras, in all periods of literature. Archetype is limitless, is timeless, and spaceless. And also these archetypes that are present in the stage plays, you can find them even in the streets these days. Maybe not these days because we are quarantined, we should avoid contact with the people as for April 2020. But uh, usually people can see that other people in the streets, they might hide their true nature, yeah, and they might resemble, or they might be like normal people, yeah, following traditional rules, going shopping, and then going to the restaurants, having some friendly sessions over a cup of tea or coffee, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, studying, working, maybe committing crime. Just different people that we can actually meet anywhere. But at the same time, we can meet people who could be defined as archetypes. That, for example, a typical villain, somebody who actually whose main point is in his or her life is to hurt other people, yeah, or to cause trouble. Or on the other hand, somebody who can be called a scapegoat, somebody who sacrifices or is sacrificed for the sake of the others, for the good of the others. Uh, there are other streams and other books, also written in 50s, 60s, apart from the theater of the absurd, which deal or which actually employ the archetypes uh, in their stories. Then there is another term, and that's allegory or allegorical vision. This entire set of the scene, along with the story, along with the characters, the symbolism, the archetypes, or the archetypal interpretation of the story, it creates an allegory, which is like an image, a likeness to the external world, like a response. It almost resembles music when there is a phrase played on the piano and there is a second phrase that is actually a response to the previous one. So these plays were reactions. Again, like I said at the beginning, these were reactions to the horrors of the Second World War, and they created the allegorical image or vision of this dystopian destroyed world filled with confusion and bewilderment of the characters. Uh, then in the PDF file, in the lecture, you see an interesting quote by Ionesco, and who defines the absurdist everyman as somebody, now I quote, somebody who is cut off from religious, metaphysical, and transcendental roots. In other words, lost. All his actions become senseless, absurd, and useless. Uh, it's very it's very negative, very dark, very pessimistic. Yeah, but at the same time, like I said it previously, there is always spark of brighter hope, brighter future, and hope for the following generations. Um, Another very important aspect of the stage plays belonging to the theater of the absurd is the language. It's actually one of the most important aspects of the absurd drama. I already told you something about the dialogues and monologues. They seem to be cut off and they seem to be very short, and don't actually uh, they don't seem to complement each other. They are not logical. But for the absurd drama, language, as you can see in the lecture, is just a vehicle, a medium for conventionalized, stereotyped, and meaningless exchanges. And these exchanges of ideas, thoughts, and feelings, they create the basis for the everyday life of these desperate, lost characters. By talking, even talking nonsense, they actually remind themselves of being alive. I talk. It resembles the old and very well known saying, Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And in this case, we can actually use the paraphrase in case of the absurd drama. I talk, therefore I am. So if I talk, it means that I'm still alive. Uh, I'm able to comprise words, so my brain is still working. And it means that actually I'm still here. I'm not a ghost, even though I'm lost. Maybe I don't see any future ahead of me, but I talk, and that's the most important thing. Uh, it is, of course, very unreliable when we talk about language, and it often doesn't bring any, doesn't deliver any essential information. You need to kind of it's almost like a puzzle. You need to bring together all the different pieces throughout the play to actually understand what that or that character was trying to say, or what is his nature like, and so on and so forth. The characters also often rely on slogans, mottos, cliches, repetitions. They distort the language, they distort the words, yeah, and they also ridicule the conventionalized way of speaking or communicating. Uh, those are all very visible and important aspects of the language. To kind of summarize this, as for language, absurd drama turns logic on its head. It subverts logic. It relishes the unexpected and the logically impossible. So maybe if you watch some of the stage plays, some of the performances or the adaptations on YouTube, for example, you might actually think that, well, I've never seen anything like this, or I've never heard anything like this, and that's actually the point. The the deliverance of the logically impossible and the unexpected uh, in front of the audience or the spectator. As for the kind of a visual side of the stage plays, uh, some of the stage plays, they borrow the principles or the the features of some artistic streams, like Dadaism, for example. As you can see in the lecture as well, Dadaism was a post-World War I cultural movement in literature and also visual arts, theater, and graphic design. And it was again the reaction against the barbarism horrors of the war. And the representatives of Dadaism, they believed uh, in this oppressive kind of counterattacking intellectual rigidity in art or of art and everyday society. And it also implemented the irrationality and the rejection of the prevailing or the previous standards of art, because war always destroys the previous standards, the previous way of living, and it brings something new. Yeah, it destroys, but it also uh, kind of cleans the slate for the new world, for the new beginning. And in this illogical uh, organization of the system, of the society, for example, that is then reflected in art, for example, like in literature or in drama, they actually, the representatives, the authors, they kind of raise their hands and they express that, yeah, now the world has gone crazy. We reflect this craziness. let's find, or let's put some hidden indices within this system, within this crazy logical system. And if people, if the spectators of the stage plays, of the absurd drama, are able to find these indices, these points of logic that are actually scattered like pieces of glass, of a broken glass, if they are able to find them and put them together, that's the good message, that's the good point. That means that actually we are ready to build a new world. Uh, okay, uh, maybe as for that French language that was used by Beckett, for example, uh, it is related to another artistic movement that is surrealism. Surrealism as the movement which, in its term itself, expresses something that is below reality or maybe above reality. Surrealism, that's style that comprises or implements the visual imagery from the subconscious mind, a dreamlike visual representation of the world. That again relates us back to the theater of the absurd, where the staging, the scene was always or often dreamlike, either a nightmare or chaotic world. Our dreams are often very chaotic; they don't make any sense. But in the end, maybe later on, you find the meaning. You maybe, if you believe that dreams can bring you some message or even answers to your questions, then you can actually understand this, that dreams are surrealistic representations of the world that you live, the waking world. And in the dream world, it often is subverted, the logic is subverted. But you can find again the pieces of logic within. So, and surrealism, it was formed in Europe, of course, and it was centered in Paris. So that's actually that actually explains the importance of French language. Um, Surrealism was also a big point of attraction for Dadaists or Dadaist community, and also for the Surrealists and the representatives of the theater of the absurd. Uh, these this these fantasies are often very symbolical as well. Um, Towards the end of the lecture, you can find some detailed information on existentialism. I'm not gonna talk about it in detail because you can read about it. Uh, maybe to summarize, the main point is that you might, if you are an existentialist, you might feel that your life, or life of all of us, is meaningless. We are just mere animals, human beings made of flesh and bones, that will live day by day, and our lives actually don't have any meaning, any point in the future. We just do it because we need to prove ourselves that, or for ourselves, that we are still alive. Just like some of those characters in the stage plays by Beckett, for example. Also, in existentialism, human beings are again limited to individuals, the units of life, just mere animals, not the group. Yeah, society was torn apart by the war, and now there we are scattered individuals within this chaotic world, and so we are lost and we are abandoned in an absurd and alien world. Also, there was often a question of the belief or yeah, the faith in God, whether God actually abandoned human beings or not. But I'm not going to talk about it, because it might be a little bit sensitive topic for some of the students or some of the people. So you can actually find it in the lecture. But it's some of the authors also ask this question, just like in Waiting for Godot, waiting for the savior of our souls, somebody or maybe something which saves this world and which gives us hope that no matter how hard the war was, we can build a new world. But as for this stage play, Waiting for Godot, God never shows up. And there are many, many very interesting principles and very interesting topics in this stage play. Uh, Unfortunately, we are not able to discuss it during the seminar because of the situation. But you have any questions, I'm actually willing to answer them by email, for example, or by Skype if you ask me. All right, so I think as for the theater of the absurd, that would be all. Uh, I'd like to sum it up finally. As for my final words related to the theater of the absurd. So the characters, they're lost, floating in the chaotic dystopian universe. They often appear almost like machines because they do the same thing every day over and over again. These types of characters are called automatons, as you can see in the lecture. They often flat characters because they don't evolve. They stay the same throughout the entire stage play. Um, the principles of existentialism and the questions of religion, the human existence, meaninglessness or meaningfulness of life is also reflected in the stage plays, and it reflects the horrors of the Second World War. And the characters are often equal, but at the same time they are different. And sometimes there is one character that is actually more dominant than the other ones. The plots are often cyclical. They don't have a logical ending. You might wait for some kind of resolution, but you don't get it. It's defined by absence, emptiness, nothingness, and unresolved mysteries. Language itself is nonsensical again. It's cut off. It's very fragmentary, and it gains often some phonetic, melodical, strange rhythmical, sometimes even musical quality, almost like if the characters were reciting poetry. The characters exchange nonsensical logical phrases which don't make any sense. They don't complement each other, but in the end, you can actually find some sense or some meaning in it. So for you, the main representative of this literary stream is Samuel Beckett, and two important stage plays that you should actually study something about is Endgame and Waiting for Godot. Okay, so that'll be all for me. Uh, Actually, it's very strange not seeing you and not talking to you directly. This is my first time doing this kind of video lecture. I'm really sorry for um, any inconvenience that might be caused during this lecture. But I hope that that you will derive something positive, something useful from this lecture. I'd like to hear from you some kind of feedback. Maybe in form of the questions or maybe some kind of discussion if you want by Skype or by email. It doesn't matter. And if you actually enjoy this kind of delivering lectures online, virtually, uh, from this garden, this beautiful sitting in my parents' garden, then I will prepare another lecture on either satire or maybe political fiction related to George Orwell, or maybe dystopia if you want to find some relatedness with the theater of the absurd or the absurd drama. So thank you very much for watching. Uh, I'm I'll be glad if you send me some feedback, and I'll hope to see you again in another lecture. So this was lecture on the absurd drama, and I wish you good health, stay safe, and just follow the rules of the government. And I hope that we will see each other very soon. Maybe in July, maybe in August. Who knows? But don't lose the point of life. Don't become fully absurd, because life has meaning. Even the reason why that I did this lecture on video gives meaning to our lives. It, it is worth continuing in your studies and my studies. So thank you very much, and God bless you. Bye-bye.